Mythos Busters, investigating the mystery, monsters, and madness of Arkham Horror, the card game.
Hello and welcome to episode 45 of Mythos Busters, where tonight we are, for the first time, very proud to be brought to you by all of our wonderful patrons. Yay!
Yeah.
Claps! Now, we're still in the process of setting up the Mythos Busters offices, so while we're working with HR to get everyone placed in what we feel is the position that best fits their skills, you'll have to be a little bit patient with us. The facilities aren't ready to use yet. Joining me tonight is the Peter Sylvester to my Agnes Baker, Ian.
Oh.
Hi, Ian.
Well, that's quite the statement. I'll take that. Hi.
How are you?
It's been a kind of a crazy week, but we're at the end of it, and I'm recording, so it's good now.
Yes, dude, same. This has been a really weird week, but I'm very glad to be settling into a Friday night with a nice Citra IPA and you guys talking about Arkham Horror, the card game.
Yeah.
Not joining us tonight is the Dr. Milan Christopher to my Daisy Walker, Scott. And also having to miss tonight because he's in the middle of being the Elephant Man.
Yeah.
The Leo DeLuca to my Any Rogue Ever, Nick. So it's just the two of us tonight. So we've got a fun episode for you tonight, despite the fact that we don't have the full crew. We're going to take care of some Patreon business, I guess, is what we would call it at this point. Yeah, that's on theme.
Mm-hmm. Business in the front.
Yes. Got a little bit of news and community to catch up on, and then our discussion topic tonight is going to be a fun one, I think. We're going to talk a little bit about how we're going about preparing for a campaign, specifically Iron Man 2018 at Arkham Nights. So we're going to kind of break down what we are doing to approach the campaign, power game it, plan ahead, coordinate decks. I don't think there's a whole lot of really intensely focused multiplayer coordination content out there, so tonight we're bringing it to you hard and fast with only two people, which is kind of counterproductive. But
Yep.
So Ian, why don't you walk us through some of our patron specifically patron,
Sure.
but it's of course in relation to Patreon business.
So first off the top, thanks to everyone who has supported us so far on Patreon. If you have not yet supported us, you can certainly do that and find us on Patreon, and we'd appreciate that. Patreon.com/MythosBusters. This episode is brought to you by Joseph Chipperfield, one of our patrons so far, so thank you very much. And we did promise special job titles for patrons at the $5 level and above. So
again, we're still working with HR, but here's a couple that we've hammered out.
Sure. We didn't want to roll them out all at once and just dump them, so we're going to roll them out a bit at a time as we get that paperwork filed and get all the T's crossed and I's dotted. So the first...
all the proper requisition forms.
Yep. Got to make sure they go through the interviews and all that.
Wait, requisition forms? It's 2018. It's going to be like a footprints ticket or something.
Something like that. The first title is for our patron Morton Dahl, and this is the Director of Gug Relations and Beer Snobbery. Those Gugs definitely need relating with, so I think I'm glad we have someone taking care of that.
You know, it's not an easy position to fill, but I think Morton's going to do just fine here. I see him shooting straight to the top.
Yeah. Got to close those deals with the Gugs. Our second job title is for our patron Kyle Cotelli, and Kyle is going to be occupying the position of Director of Tentacle Management and Legume Quantification. Now, what exactly does that entail, Sean?
You guys get it? He's a bean counter.
It's pretty good.
That was one of the first ones I thought of when we thought of this level of patron. So there you go, guys. That's That's the level that you can hope to expect for all future patrons who are put in positions in the Mythos Busters offices.
Hit him with both barrels on that one.
So, again, big thanks to Joseph and Morton and Kyle who were mentioning on this episode. And I want to take a second to personally thank everyone who's pledged and who intends to pledge and who might pledge after hearing this episode or a subsequent episode. I think the most valuable thing that anyone can give anyone else is their time, like everyone does when they come to listen to our podcast, our silly little niche podcast about pushing cardboard around. Mm-hmm. But of course, the second most valuable thing that anyone could give to us is their hard-earned money. So I think that I was blown away by the response. I did not expect us to hit the level that we did quite so quickly. Like before we hit our last episode, we're almost to the point where all of our costs are covered, like the ground level, hey, we've got Patreon set up and rolling, our goals there. So again, just seriously, thank you to everyone who's pledged so far. And if you're one of the people who maybe intends to pledge and just hasn't had the time to sit down at your computer yet, I know that would be me. If I were a Mythos Busters listener or another podcast that I listen to were doing something similar, that's me. Like, every intention to do it, never get around to hopping on Patreon just because
Right.
I'm not thinking about it unless I'm listening to the podcast. So to sweeten the deal, Ian, tell them what we have in store.
Yeah, so we are going to sweeten the pot a little bit, a lot of it, I think, because one of the things we talked about in doing Patreon and is in our pledge levels is being able to be part of Patreon exclusive contests. So what that means is if you're a patron, you are going to be one of the small elite minority that is going to be part of this draw, because people who are not patrons aren't going to be part of this draw, which is a long way of saying...
You'll be cooler than the other kids, is basically what Ian's saying.
You have a better chance of winning, is the short way of saying that. So what is the contest going to be for? So... we're going to be running the contest, and at the end of it, we'll draw some random patrons to win. The grand prize for the contest is going to be a set of promos from Arkham Nights. So that means if you aren't going to Arkham Nights, this is a chance to get your hands on that sweet, sweet cash. And if you are going, well, maybe it's a chance to get a second load of the promos that you can do whatever you want with. You can take a bath in it or whatever. Or
eBay them, probably worth more that way.
Sure.
I know it's kind of frowned upon in various parts of the community, but it is indeed an option.
One is as good as the other, I think, bath or eBay. And we're gonna have a couple of...
Sounds like the oddest choice ever.
Bath or eBay. It's either one or the other.
Just a terrible, terrible game show.
Now I kind of want to see that. You either have to put that item on eBay or take a bath with it? Is that how the game show works?
Or throw it in the bath?
Yeah, something like... Ooh, that could get dangerous, yeah.
All right, we'll workshop this offline.
Yeah, well, maybe that's the next competition with Drawn to the Flame. So we're also going to have some runner-up prizes, second prizes. So for two other patrons who don't win the grand prize, what you'll get is a set of our alt art promos that we did for Gen Con, which was an alt art find clothes and emergency quiche. So you'll get your hands on those even if you didn't get a chance to get them at Gen Con. So even if you don't win the grand prize, you still have a chance to get some other stuff in your hands. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to draw those names in about a month's time. So if you're not yet a patron, you have about a month to go ahead and pledge at $1 above any of those levels, and you'll have a chance to win.
Yeah, so closing this off officially, we'll call it the end of October, but really it's not going to matter until the first recording we do after October closes, so whenever that ends up being. Mm-hmm. I don't know, I'm way too lazy to look at the calendar and work out when that would be. Yeah. I'll be honest with you guys. I'm working late hours tonight. We're half-assing it. It's a fake a Friday.
Yep. That sounds about right.
All right, excellent. So, moving on from the Patreon stuff, one thing we didn't get to touch on last week, because I know we had kind of a meteor discussion topic, What you been playing lately, Ian?
Well, a couple things. So, I finally started a Jenny playthrough of Forgotten Age solo. I feel like how I usually play this game is I play kind of the new hotness gators first off the bat. And then I start bringing out the ones that are precious to me once I know the campaign a bit more. So I'm finally putting Jenny through the paces and have her up to through Boundary Beyond. I still have to play Heart of the Elders and City of Archives. But she's not doing too badly. I think because
What, Jenny? Really?
Because I know the campaign well at this point. And there's nothing too fancy about the build. It's pretty similar to like the Jenny builds that I've been running for a while now, like the Dr. Milan, just cash money build,
the pay to win build.
Yeah, that's kind of my old reliable, and then like the skill cards, like physical trading to round out streetwise, basically. Mm-hmm. And the Boundary Beyond run was basically just an exercise in me just like taking my time and setting up for the boss battle at the end. And I did not push hard to get any of the paths. I got one, and I was happy with that. Thank you very much, with no trauma. So yeah, that's pretty much how that went. Oh, but I will say one new aspect of it though is Lola Santiago, which I did not have in previous campaigns. So I've thrown her in.
Because that would have been nonsense.
Yeah. I have Charisma, and in the past I would supplement Milan with, who would I use? Leo DeLuca, I think. But I'm experimented with the Lola Santiago, and yeah, she's as good as advertised. I mean, it's... I
can't imagine in solo with Jenny specifically, because you're just churning out the cash, especially when you build for it. That's got to be just nuts. Just like, swoop, here's a clue now.
Yeah, like, the thing is, it's just everything at once. The fact that it's testless, for one, so it's just guaranteed clue. And then it's also a free action, so that's why I can kind of substitute it instead of Leo, because you're kind of saving an action there. And then on top of that, you get some passive boost too. So it's kind of bonkers.
It's like having a hunch that you can just continue to play.
Yeah,
that's just she's very good. She's very good, and is in fact no nonsense.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah. And the only other thing I've been playing is I just barely started a solo Daisy run through Dunwich, because in our mod chat, you and Scott were talking up solo Daisy so much, and I haven't played solo Daisy much, maybe like 1 or 2 plays back in the day, so I'm getting that started.
Man, solo Daisy is so fun. If anyone else out there has not tried her yet... I mean, she's susceptible to the same things that any solo seeker who can't really fight or evade is susceptible to. But if you go like the willpower spell route and you have 2 I've Got a Plans, 2 Mind Over Matters, and 2 Shrivelings, like most of the time you can kind of cover your ass. Mm-hmm. And then as soon as you then hop into higher ed, then it's just money. And Daisy's so fun.
Yeah, I was having some bad well, I mean, I've only played one scenario so far, and the first scenario was hard because you don't have higher ed yet, and I was having bad luck drawing my Shrivelings. But what actually saved me was that I was running Malison, which gave me a mulligan on some very tough enemies that were going to pop up and just destroy me. And thankfully, Malison gave me a mulligan on that, so I didn't get splattered.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. I haven't used Malison in a while, but I decided to throw him in to see if he could help me avoid those bad combat situations.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that in Solo Seeker for sure. I mean, he was good enough in Roland, and Roland can handle enemies. So
yeah, I mean, I think once things get set up more, maybe I'll be going more traditional Milan, but we'll see.
So, speaking of Daisy, pretty much the main thing I've played since the last time we talked is I've started up a prep kind of run through of Carcosa in preparation for Iron Man, and we'll talk in detail about it later. But specifically, I'm running my Daisy deck that I'll be bringing to Iron Man, And then I've got Nick's Leo. Well, it's not actually Nick's Leo deck. It's my Leo deck. I just grabbed Leo because that's who Nick is going to be playing. But guys, as a result, I'm going to say something crazy here. And I want you all to just take a deep breath before you judge me.
Okay.
Let me get this out. I found a place for knuckle dusters.
I kind
And
of
I'm
don't
calling
believe
it-
you, but
I'm calling it CQC Leo.
go on.
CQC stands for Close Quarters Combat. It's a Metal Gear Solid reference. So Leo's in an interesting position. This is the first time I've built him in a not... oh, hey, Matt's in the chat. Hi, Matt. So anyway, this is the first time I've built him in not a well-rounded way. Like, last time I built him to go through Forgotten Age, I built, like, 2 Flex Investigators. He wasn't specialized. So this time, since Daisy's really taking on the brunt of clues, I really built him with, a little bit of capability for swiping some clues. But for the most part, he's a monster killer. So he's got his guard dogs, he's got his beat cops, and then first things I've upgraded into are hired muscle.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've packed the deck pretty much as I can with nothing but combat icons and willpower icons. So the whole point of this is that you get to like 5-6 combat when you have all your allies out, or even 2 of your allies out.
Sure.
And then your knuckle dusters. I mean, if you're swinging at 5 with a lot of damn combat icons to throw, it's become a good thing. And you know what else I pack in that deck? I pack guard dog, as I mentioned. So if the enemy retaliates because you missed with knuckle dusters, you just stick your dog on him.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
And then I've got combat knife, so if I miss with knuckle dusters and the enemy gets to attack me again, then I can, combat knife and potentially also guard dog. So it's an interesting type of build, and it's almost more like the allies. You're meant to churn through kind of the meat of the allies and use your calling in favors to keep health, or not rather to keep health on them, but to pull them back to your hand when they're almost done and play them back down later. But anyway, it's been really fun, and Knuckle Dusters has performed. And so I've got Knuckle Dusters, Survival Knife, and the Colt is my other weapon in that deck. I'm playing it basically like Mark.
So for the hired muscles, are you basically like getting rid of them as soon as you can, just like soaking up, or are you just keeping them on the table and just eating the cost?
Well, when you don't play heavy weapons, it's not that big a deal to pay the cost. I keep them around as long as I can. It's not a huge deal when they go away. Generally, with this build, I'm kind of taking attacks anyway, so having that meat soak's not a bad thing to have. It's been really good. I was kind of like, oh, this is going to be risky, but after we got through the first scenario, after we got through Curtain Call, in Last King, it was money. I never had an issue with enemies.
Yeah, I guess that's the other thing with the Retaliate. If you do have those meat shields there, then getting hit back isn't the worst thing in the world. I mean, it sounds like the best argument so far for Knuckle Duster, because there hasn't been any good ones so far, but it seems like that's kind of the sweet spot for it.
It would not surprise me if there is another investigator that's released at some point in the mid to near future that is better with Knuckle Dusters, but I have found them a good home in this deck.
Well, I think particularly in multiplayer too, just for the fact that like machete is king. Everyone always says machete, 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 but I feel like sometimes people underrate the disadvantage in multiplayer when you get stuck with multiple enemies and you're not getting that extra damage.
And you know why that is? I feel like most people who play this game play it solo.
Yep, and that's me too. I constantly have a blind spot for multiplayer, but
and there's just that bias out there. Machete's a great card, don't get me wrong. It's super efficient for what it does, but for someone who plays 2-player up 95% of the time, like I have seen moments when Machete just doesn't do what everyone says Machete's always going to do. So,
yeah.
And I like that. I like that in certain situations with different play styles, a different weapon mix is the way to go.
Mm-hmm. And for some reason, when you're crowded by a swarm of enemies, a brass knuckles are much better than a machete for getting them off you.
Truth.
Just swinging wildly.
All right, so let's move it on from here. We're going to hop into community highlights really quickly here, even though Nick is not with us, because I want to just kind of announce that we're going to be approaching community highlights in a little bit of a different way going forward. So in lieu of the full episode that we kind of talked about doing a couple episodes ago, we're going to be just every episode pointing toward a specific content producer. So instead of Nick, kind of like to call out custom scenarios and various things, we're going to focus specifically on other content producers that you might want to check out. Blogs, YouTube channels, so on and so forth. So those of you who have written to us, you're going to be first in line for us running through, and anyone else who's out there producing content and would like to get a mention on the at the front of the episode, just let us know and write us at mythospod@gmail.com.
Is
that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that is correct. I will say that with certainty.
So what do we have for the community this week?
Yeah, so the first one we'll highlight, and kind of echoing what Sean said, we didn't want to do a big laundry list all in one episode. We thought it'd be more effective and interesting just to take turns kind of spotlighting one. So the one we're going to spotlight this week is a blog. The blog is Right of Seeking. This can be found at rightofseeking.com. And this is a really interesting site because it's been around for a bit. Can't find the earliest post, but it's been around for a while. And it has some of the content that you would expect from a Arkham blog and is well done. Like currently running through a Finn campaign of the Dunwich Legacy and running through that campaign. And then there's lots of kind of articles about specific investigators and kind of specific cards. But the other cool thing about the site is it's kind of become too like a version of the Onion for the Arkham Horror LCG community, which is by far my favorite feature of it. Yes, he does these very funny articles, like satire articles about stuff that is kind of talked a lot about in the Arkham community and whatnot, and does it well, I have to say, because someone could approach that and not pull it off, but I think he has a knack for making it very funny and pulling off the satire. So those are always good for a good, quick, humorous read as well. So a good mix of comedy there as well as quality Arkham content. So Right of Seeking, I recommend going to check out that blog if you haven't already.
Yes, and again, even if you don't plan on following on an ongoing basis, which you should still consider, definitely check out the satire articles because they are the best. The Agnes one had me in stitches.
Yes.
Okay, so we had not the news that everyone's been clamoring for, but we had some news, yes?
Yeah, we did have some news. Again, everyone is kind of waiting with bated breath for the next deluxe to be announced, but that has not happened yet. We did get the announcement of the Invocation event. So if you have no idea what that is a special event that is held at game stores throughout the country and world. And essentially, it's a chance for Arkham players to get together and play a scenario together. In this case, the scenario is going to be the Eternal Slumber. And also, as part of that, usually there's some kind of swag, and they revealed this time the swag is going to be a sweet playmat featuring some Egypt-inspired art. I think this is from the Elder Sign Egypt expansion, if I'm not totally off on that. And then the art in the tentacle pool in the background, that's from one of the cards in the Eternal Slumber. Do you remember which card it was? No, I do not.
A dark sacrifice.
Okay. Now I know why you remembered it. So you get a playmat, and you also get these cool looking player card dividers. So there's one for Mystic, Survivor, etc. So you can, if you keep your cards in a box as opposed to a binder, you can use these dividers to separate the class cards. So those are cool as well.
Is there a deck box included in this, or am I thinking of the Arkham Nights swag bag?
No, you're thinking of the Arkham Nights swag bag, which was also announced. Yeah, that one has a deck box in it. This one just has the playmat and the dividers. I like the dividers. Cool. I kind of was hoping to see an alt art investigator just because I like seeing alt art for characters.
Yes! Give us that. That's my jam. Like, give me my characters in different... Like, I play a video game. I am a costume whore. Give me all the skins.
All those DLCs.
I want that one in pink, even though I'll never wear it. Just give me the skins. I want alternate art investigators more than anything else.
And those cool, the hard plastic mini card like we got for Daisy last year. Those were very cool.
Yes. That was one of those things where I was like, damn, too bad they didn't think to do all of the mini cards in acrylic. Though I'm pretty sure we've already talked about that.
Yeah. But that's about it for the news. We're still waiting, and maybe they're saving the announcement for Arkham Nights itself. Who knows at this point? But we'll see. Can't really do much about it except for continue your sacrifices at home.
Yeah. Maybe use a sharper knife. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Should we move on to Firstborns next week? I kind of feel like it might be a little too soon.
Maybe a little too soon. Have to work your way up through the animal kingdom first, I think. I don't know. But yeah, that's it for the news.
All right, so let's move it on then to our main topic.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about Iron Man 2018.
They should just have a recording of you doing that and play it over the loudspeakers.
So the basis of this topic tonight is that at Arkham Nights, starting last year, and I think we're going to make this a tradition pretty much for every year going forward that we're able to make it, is we've done an Iron Man run through of the next campaign that's available to us. So last year we sat down on the Saturday of Arkham Nights and we pounded through all eight scenarios in Dunwich Legacy?
Yep.
Or is it's 7 because it's technically 1A and 1B, if we're being super technical.
Well, okay.
Still 8 scenarios, though,
Yeah.
if we're counting them, if we're quantifying them. So we sat down for all 8 scenarios back to 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 back on Saturday, and we started when the center opened at 10 a.m., and we barely finished before the place shuttered that night. So it's a thing. So kind of part of it for us is just the experience of power gaming the hell out of these things. Coordinating is something at this level that I don't get to do aside from this one time per year. Like I'll coordinate 2 decks together, and that is generally the extent of the pre-planning I get to do. So I really find this part fun. So this year we're going to be tackling Carcosa.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is my first Iron Man because I wasn't present last year, and super looking forward to it. And it's not like usually when I take on a campaign, I'm not super power gamey about any given campaign, or I don't put that much thought into planning it out. But I like this exercise that we're going to be talking about today, and that we've been talking about a little bit beforehand in preparation of just like, how do you prepare for a campaign when you are trying to... It's not even so much power game, it's more like we are all together and spending all this time together. We kind of want a good result, so we're going to plan it out to make that happen.
Well, I mean, okay, so I think we should say up front, and I get to say this unchallenged tonight because Scott's not here. I don't think any of us would really advocate for this sort of thing being the default way you approach the game.
Right.
Our goal at this point is to play through the campaign in one day and really to just, I guess, demonstrate to ourselves that what's possible when you have 4 experienced players who have coordinated decks, who know the scenarios. Like this is like the, well, maybe not difficulty wise, but it's like the high end boss raid in an MMO, right? Like this is where you prep. You know, if we were really like going high end boss raid, we'd play on harder expert, but fuck that noise. So I guess starting out, what? Okay, so approaching this, I suppose we should go it from this angle. We have since March, in various forms or so, been kind of talking about general plans because we assumed we wouldn't be getting another deluxe box that releases before Arkham Nights, and we kind of knew about what our card pool would be, so we started drawing out light plans, and those have gotten heavier and heavier until, of course, we were able to finally get tickets to Arkham Nights and confirm that we were going. So we've already done a little bit of this discussion offline, but I wanted to dive into the nitty-gritty tonight of how we're going to walk through the campaign itself and then kind of talk about what we're doing with our decks and our strategy to compensate.
Yeah, and I'll say that, like, even if you're not going to Arkham Nights and you're never going to play an Iron Man in your life, we also wanted to do this topic because I think it is useful, like Sean said at the top, that there's not a ton of, like, multiplayer focused content for this game out there to just talk about, like, how do you intensely plan out a multiplayer experience with other people, and it doesn't have to be Iron Man style, but just how do you kind of, like, maximize multiplayer games, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah, and I realized I just kind of like tangented myself out of what I was originally trying to say in that whole rant. We don't necessarily advocate playing this way all the time because, you know what, guys, if everyone's playing all the power cards all the time, the game gets boring. So, for the love of God, don't take this as a, this is the way you should play this game type segment. This is a, hey, if you want to go hard and blast a campaign in the face, here's what we'd recommend you do.
Yes.
With a shotgun.
Sure. Yeah. Whatever's handy.
You made it weird. Okay, now I made it weird. So let's talk about Carcosa as a campaign. So obviously, if anyone out there has not completed the Path to Carcosa campaign, now's a good time, if you're trying to avoid spoilers, to turn the old podcast off and catch us another time. Because we're assuming that everyone who's listening has played Carcosa and is willing to kind of hear some theory crafting on I guess, strategering, I was about to say.
Yep.
Strategizing your way through it. So, Ian, what do you think is specific to Carcosa as a campaign that requires like a bullet point of, hey, we need to address this?
I think number one, more than anything else at the top, is like the central mechanic of Carcosa is this doubt conviction thing, which is kind of a binary path that you end up going doubt or conviction, and that affects it especially affects two scenarios, Phantom of Truth, but especially the final one. And so I think at the top, when you're approaching Carcosa, you have to decide just what is the end result you're going for. Are you going for doubt or are you going for conviction?
And in our case, and we actually just finally landed on a decision today in my mind, although apparently everyone else had already made it, we are going conviction?
Mm-hmm. I like how you said conviction with a lack of conviction.
Abstract oxymoron. Here's kind of what we talked about. In my mind, and you could have to double check if I'm getting this right. I should probably actually pull my Carcosa cards out while we talk about this. But the doubt Hastur at the end of the campaign is the one that sits on the board, not on a location, and will attack everyone unless someone hits a big willpower test to exhaust him. Is that accurate?
Yeah, he's floating off in space, like not on the map, and then he just keeps attacking you each turn unless someone passed the willpower test to evade him, essentially.
And what's funny is that it in my mind, like, that to me is the best option for multiplayer, because that one is so incredibly easy to manage with one action. One action from one investigator to hit a willpower test once per turn neuters Hastur for the turn. But you guys presented an argument that ended up winning the day. Yeah,
so... And I definitely agree with you that doubt is much kinder in multiplayer versus solo. Like, I feel like solo doubt is probably the harshest experience of solo Dim Carcosa, unless you have certain investigators. Like, an investigator with high will and high intellect is probably like the one who will like that, but otherwise it's tough because you have to worry about pulling off that evade action by yourself and then also gathering the clues. So our
in solo it's brutal.
It's so rough. So the argument for conviction that we were kind of talking about is that the conviction has stores actually on the board at one location, massive, of course, and you just straight up kill him. Oh, one thing we didn't mention about the doubt Hastor is that he can only be damaged through the
clue acquisition,
the effects on the locations, which are through getting clues. The conviction Hastor, you just basically pound on him until he gets destroyed, and you can also do the location damage as well, so you can get best of both worlds. So you can send your Clover off. So I think that's part of why we were leaning conviction, is it's just more flexible of how you take them out. And it's just a bit more straightforward that you don't have to worry about like finding the right locations to get the damage on and yada yada yada. It's basically once he comes out, everyone piles on him and just blows him to pieces. And one person can do an evade, which will probably be me, a classic agility evade to try to lock him down. So it's more of a traditional boss fight, basically, I guess is a good way to put it.
Sure.
You do have to chew through a lot of damage, though. It's 36 damage, I believe. 9 per.
Yes, it's 9 per. Whew.
Mm-hmm. And I think the other one is 7 per, I want to say.
Yep, okay, I've got them right here. So King in Yellow 7 per. Mm-hmm. Lord of Carcosa is the one that we're going for, is 9 per, and then the Tattered King is 8 per.
Mm-hmm. So it's a difference of what, 2 per? So a difference of 8
per. Right.
Yeah. Per episode title per. Yeah, so that's pretty much why we decided to go conviction. And I think there's also another compelling reason, which we'll get into a bit in the scenarios, but that's conviction is also
I think you can call it out here.
The conviction route is also the one where you just get to murk and kill the the VIPs and burn them to pieces if you want, so that you don't have to deal with them popping out the rest of the campaign.
So kind of looping that back, one of the things that I had down for something specific to Carcosa and how you address it is the VIPs. How are you going to handle these big recurring bosses? And that goes hand in hand with our choice to go conviction, because that is a 2 birds, 1 stone situation.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like in general, taking the 1 mental trauma to just never deal with any of the bosses again is generally a decent trade.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's basically what it is. Once you know how the whole Carcosa plays out, you take a mental trauma right before Phantom of Truth. And so, yeah, I think that's a fair trade to not have to worry about. And it's kind of one of those multiplayer things too, because I feel like in multiplayer you probably have more tools to deal with the bosses, but I feel like I'm not super versed in 4-player games, but 4-player games are always way more unpredictable in my book than solo. Mm-hmm. Like solo, you just have to worry about getting yourself out, and you can kind of try to rush through before one of those bosses pops out, and if it does pop out, you can just dodge around the board, do what you gotta do. But in multiplayer, like,
you need to work as a team. Who knew?
Yeah, and multiplayer things can go like wrong when you don't expect it, and so I think the more you can minimize like the X factors, like these wild cards, like these VIPs, the better off you are. That's kind of how I think about it.
Okay. So I think we would be remiss if we did not mention one of the very specific mechanics in this campaign, and that would be the Man in the Pallid Mask. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it's actually really a choice in big multiplayer. I have the question here: how hard will you chase the stranger? Mm-hmm. I think that's a question you ask in like solo 2-player when he's going to be at random places across the board at random times, and who knows if you'll be anywhere near. But in 4-player, I feel like that's not going to be as big a thing. So we're chasing him hard is essentially the answer to that question. And what do you think we need to do to make sure that we can do that well?
Yeah, I think the main thing for him is he has that very annoying 3 health stat, which is always annoying to take care of because 2 is like the sweet spot, but 3 you need usually 2 actions to get rid of. And then he also has aloof. So that can take some actions to take him out. So I think the main thing is
Dynamite Blast,
Dynamite
Blast,
Yep.
Dynamite Blast.
Dynamite Blast is really good for that, so someone probably will be running that, at least for that. Or Backstab is a good option too. That's a hits 3. What else? I've Got a Plan. Can hit 3 at the right time.
Sure. A cheeky bow and arrow, perhaps, in a Safina deck with...
Sure.
Granted, you're probably running lockpicks, but...
Yeah. And I think just movement stuff, probably? Because doesn't he usually spawn, like, across the board? Like, farthest from all investigators, I think, is the usual spawn.
Yeah. Yep. And on that point, I know BD Flurry pointed it out in the chat here too, I have always held that if you want to chase a stranger hard, you put him in the deck of the investigator who draws the most cards.
Yeah.
So we haven't talked about exactly how we're building our investigator decks yet, but I'm going to assume that's me as Daisy.
Yes, yeah.
Because it's very few investigators who see more cards than Daisy when she has her old Book of Lore out.
Yeah, that's a good point, because... That's one of the reasons, too, in solo and two-handed with a lot of investigators, is you just don't... It's not even, like, hitting the man, it's, like, seeing him in the first place. There are a lot of games where he just doesn't come out. So, I think part of it is intentionally, like, having an investigator and 4-player that's trying to dig for him.
And Daisy seems up to that task better than anyone.
Yeah. Plus, I think... There are some treacheries.
It's going to be a thing. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. There are some treacheries, too.
That line lag.
Yeah. There are some treacheries that pull him out, too, which I think we'll see more in 4-player, so...
Yeah, definitely, in the scenarios that include them. Mm-hmm. I anticipate, though, that there will be more than one time where I will Old Book of Lore, and I'll pull the stranger in that 3, and I'm like, guys, do we want him out? I really want this deduction.
Yeah. That'll be a tough call when it happens.
So then I think we've talked about how you kind of choose your endgame hoster, because that's all tied in with conviction and doubt. So I think the last thing that we really kind of talked about planning for, although I think maybe have planned least for, is that the Unspeakable Oath can be a mid-campaign knockout punch for some and or all of your investigators if you get really unlucky. Mm-hmm. So one thing we're all doing is we all have an investigator that we're ready to hop into should everything go awry for our first set.
Yeah, that's we definitely talked about everyone needs a backup investigator if things go wrong in an Unspeakable Oath, which they can. I've played one game of Unspeakable Oath 4-player, and only one person made it out. This was standalone, granted, but only one person made it out. So I could, if that happened in a campaign, it would be really rough. So hopefully that won't happen, but it's something you have to plan for. It's kind of like, It's not just planning for the end game of Dim Carcosa. I think there's also a midpoint of this campaign that you have to plan specifically of what your deck is going to look like going into Unspeakable Oath, and how the hell you're going to get out of Unspeakable Oath alive.
And this isn't like some cute kitchen table campaign where you can be like, oh, well, I guess I'm not going to play with other investigators. That's the end of this campaign. I'll go start another one tomorrow. Like, no. This is serious business. We have to be ready with those alternate decks, like nothing happened. So,
yeah,
definitely something that we're taking into account.
Yeah, for sure. It makes me nervous just thinking about it.
So before I think we should actually flip the way we have this listed in the show notes here. Before we hop into actual scenarios and kind of things we're planning to do as a 4-player group. Let's kind of talk about what decks we have planned at the moment. So our team composition, we decided to kind of go with our classic... I suppose it's still kind of a triangle, right? Because there's only 3 classifications that we're using. It's just there's 4 people. Mm-hmm. We've got a Clover, a Killer, and we're going to run 2 Flexes.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be running a Daisy deck that's going to upgrade... after the Last King into the Guiding Stones, and then use Higher Ed and Milan to just get to ungodly amounts of intellect and just hungry hippos up clues off of High Shroud locations. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty much all I'm designing the deck to do. Later in the campaign, I'll upgrade into a couple of protective incantations because I'm not using those arcane slots, so why not?
Yeah.
I can pull those nasty tokens out. But that's pretty much the build. I'm trying to think if I even had anything else that's kind of worth noting in there. It's really just a straight investigate, get clues, upgrade your stones, and go.
Mm-hmm. And then we're going to have, so the classic setup, like mentioned, we have the Clover that you're playing, and then we're going to have the Killer, which is going to be Leo, controlled by Nick, whose job, just like it sounds, is going to be to kill anything that moves, except for us, I guess, hopefully not us, but everything that's not us that moves, Leo is going to be aiming to destroy quickly. So I don't know exactly what that deck is going to look like because Nick has to build it, but I assume Shotgun's going to be in there
Nick
somewhere.
Doesn't know what that deck's going to look like.
Right, yeah. Although he has expressed fondness for the bar, so we'll see if that wins out or the Shotgun, but there'll be some kind of big gun in there.
It was kind of funny. We were talking earlier in the day about how we're cutting off the ends of the preparedness spectrum in our discussion today because Nick hasn't had time to do anything. And Scott's the one's like, all right, I've got 3 spreadsheets. Here's our flow chart. And they're both not here. So
he has
the
room like you see in a like serial killer movie where he's plotted out all the pictures connected by string.
So, someone throw up that picture of Charlie Day in the Pepe Sylvia episode of It's Always Sunny. That whole thing. And then Scott will be playing a recursion Yorick, who's going to lean toward killing, but still be able to grab clues when needed. And to my knowledge, his current plan is to upgrade as quickly as possible into Key of Ease, because Key of Ease with Yorick is just disgusting.
Yep. And I am going to be running the other flex spot, meaning investigator, who can kind of do either getting clues or killing. But in my case, Scott's flex is leaning more towards combat, and mine's leaning a little more towards getting clues. Although since it's flex, it can do a little bit of both. But also, I'm running Safina. And Safina is kind of one of the most toolboxes possible in the game, because she is so focused on events, and events tend to be the prime like toolbox cards in the game, and
they're like big pivot effects, right?
Right.
So she's just a good pivoter.
In a lot of event like assets, they're staying on the board, right? They're there for the long term. In events, a lot of them are kind of niche. They're meant for certain situations, and they're not going to pop up every game. So to kind of maximize that aspect, I am going to be getting adaptable very early with Safina is my plan. And I'm going to be, that's part of why I wanted to do this planning too, is because I want to be able to plan out all my adaptables in advance and just know, okay, what does this scenario really need? Swap it in. And because Safina has that ability to have those events under her card, she can get the most out of whatever events those happen to be. So that's kind of the plan. And when I get to Dim Carcosa, then she'll have the tools to like take on Haster, for example. Like, and the other thing I like about her for Carcosa is even though I am fond of my Finns and Skids with lower willpower, Safina rocks 4 will and 4 agility, which in multiplayer Carcosa I think is a really nice stat line to have.
Yeah, you're going to be designated Hastur Scooby-Dooer in the last scenario.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Definitely gonna have to be. That's my plan. Is pretty much I'm gonna be locking down Hastur is gonna be my job at that point.
So, question. This isn't in our show notes, so we're kind of ad-libbing here. Do you have your deck built yet?
I have the Dim Carcosa version built.
Okay.
I might make some tweaks to it because that's kind of my first draft, but now I have to go back and build the kind of curtain call for scenario version. Which was another question, we were going to talk about is, like, how do you go about even building a deck for something like this?
Yeah, that was exactly my question. Like, I did the same thing, where basically what I built was the 30 experience version of the deck. So it's like the deck I want to build into. Mm-hmm. If anyone's curious, I'll post it in the old chat here. So Yeah, so it's not anything crazy. Like I said, I've got the guiding stones in there as a big piece. The protective incantation will hopefully do some work in that arcane slot as well. I've got a couple of deciphered realities, and then beyond that, I've got deductions leveled up. I've got an eidetic memory, hopefully to get another use out of deciphered reality. And then I think the only other kind of cute include that maybe not everyone would think of is I threw in Enraptured because that combos really well with the guiding stones and should allow me to put another charge on that old bad boy if I succeed the test.
On my end, and I'll say that this is again, I don't plan for any usual campaign I do that way. Like, I don't build my last scenario deck first and then go back, but because we're doing this, like, you kind of have to do that to know where you're going, because like, you don't want to just haphazardly pick the upgrades, and no one also wants to just sit there and watch as you like well, you like are all mulling over all the options for what you should upgrade, and you also need to know what to bring too. So there's lots of reasons. So my Safina for Dim Carcosa is, so I have basically lots of damage effects for her event suite. Like, she has her usual kind of assets that you would expect in Safina, like the Spirit, Athame, etc., the spells. But I have Backstab to get some damage on. I have upgraded Blinding Light. I think that's a good way to both lock down Hastor and get some damage on him. I plan to have...
And at that point, you don't care about taking the horror, right?
Yeah, definitely not. And I have upgraded Sneak Attack for even more damage. Very key, the upgraded Wards of Protection, because some of those treacheries in Dim Carcosa are just... brutal, and so the upgraded wards I'm probably going to have way earlier in the campaign, actually, because that's something we talked about, is that in multiplayer you really want those level 2 wards because they can cancel a card for another investigator. So like if a Straight Jacket, for example, pops out in Unspeakable Oath, that's something that could get canceled. So that's kind of how I'm going. For Dim Carcosa, I'm going heavy on those kind of damage evadey events.
And I think that's actually a big point that's going to be relevant to 3 out of the 4 of our builds just because of how they work. And I'll speak for Scott in this case and say that those cancels are a pretty high priority, because being able to kind of spot cancel those nasty treacheries as they come out, that's really powerful. I played Lord of the Rings, and a Test of Will goes in every deck it can. So
yeah. And I also...
And that's essentially what level 2 ward is, just to translate that for you guys.
I also plan on having 2 double or nothings for that as well, because I'm planning on setting up Nick for his big moment of glory with whatever big weapon he has. If we can pull off a double or nothing on Hastor, that'll take a big chunk out of him.
Dude, I mean, you're also going to set me up on my guiding stones, right? I mean, a girl's got a clue to eat. I'm really excited for I'm sure those double or nothing moments are going to be the highlights, the emotional highlights of the campaign.
Yeah, I mean, it may come down to like one pull of like whether we survive or not. That's gonna be rough. Yeah, Mirrored in our chat is talking about possibly running Premonition for those double or nothing plays. I mean, it's worth a thought.
Guys, I'm sorry. I am so very positive on Premonition if you're doing anything risky or token related. It is such a good card.
Yeah, and Casey in our chat is talking about Time Warp. Yeah, I'm a fan of Time Warp in multiplayer as well, because not so much towards the beginning, because there's other stuff I think you need to spend on, but as you get towards those make or break scenarios, like I think around Unspeakable Oath time, I've used Time Warp to good effect. Like, anything that can give you a do-over on key turns when it's life or death is kind of important.
Yep. And I will say, I don't know if all you guys are going to do it too, but this kind of run through on my own to refresh myself and kind of figure out my path with Daisy specifically has been extremely valuable. Because the first thing I did after I finished Curtain Call, I identified the stones in the first scenario, is I went to go upgrade both of them, and I'm like, hell yeah, Clue City. And then as I'm setting up Last King, I'm like, oh, that's not how this one works. Back it up, back it up. I guess we'll go higher ed.
Yeah, that's the other thing is once you have your kind of end scenario build, is then you have to like build backwards and basically, like, I don't think you necessarily have to have it all charted out, although you could, but you need to at least know like what kind of order you're going to grab. Like, you can basically make a list of all the upgrades you have in your final deck and then make a kind of rough order of what order you're going to buy stuff in, depending on what scenarios come up first.
So I know you called out a few in your build. Do you think, kind of as we're presenting this as kind of a general idea, there are any specific cards or deck building decisions that people would look to make if they're tackling Carcosa, or anything that we might want to look to make if our Oath investigators bite it? I feel like... Fine clothes is the answer I was looking for, Ian. Fine clothes.
Sure.
Fine clothes.
Okay,
fine clothes.
Definitely fine clothes, although those can be like taken out at a certain point.
Yes, agree.
In a general sense, like leaving aside the scenario specific things, I think whatever is going to help you kill Hastor at the end, which is what we talked about in our builds. But then also, I think just in general, any movement stuff in Carcosa is gold, especially for Unspeakable Oath.
Yeah, and I'd say, and I don't know if this is specific to Carcosa, but I think anything horror healing or horror soaking is going to go a long way.
Yeah, yeah, that too.
I probably can call that specific to Carcosa, though it's certainly not unimportant elsewhere.
It's definitely emphasized, which makes sense given Hastor's kind of role in the mythos. And I think, I haven't done a scientific analysis, but I think Carcosa has to win the award for biggest maps in a campaign yet. Not all scenarios, because the first and last have small ones, but like Unspeakable Oath is big, Phantom of Truth is a big map, Pallid gets a big map, of course. Echoes is like kind of only 9 locations, but the way it's structured, like it kind of gets like channeled through the center like staircases.
It's 10 technically.
Right, 10 with the library. So that one you need movement to like, because it's basically whack-a-mole, just trying to move around and kill the cultists. So yeah, movement. Elusive, astral travel, shortcut level 2, all those kind of things.
Yeah, I was just thinking that. Like, I've got this level 30 build and I'm already seeing things I'll probably do differently. So I'm glad we're talking about this. I probably will upgrade my shortcuts to level 2s because there are definitely nice little points to drop those throughout the campaign.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Black Star's Rise is big as well. Yeah, I think it's just the first and last scenarios that are smaller maps, but all the rest, they're huge maps.
All right. So let's kind of talk our way through the campaign scenario by scenario. I know we've already covered all of these scenarios specifically as far as like strategy and whatnot, but I want to talk about what we're planning to do and kind of how we're planning to tackle it.
Mm-hmm.
So, starting with our favorite slap in the face curtain call.
This is a doozy.
I think the big thing here is that, honestly, I might eat my words, but I think curtain call's less of a thing, like slap in the face wise, in multiplayer. In high level multiplayer accounts, like 3+.
I think so too. I haven't played it much in 4-player, but I have to imagine it's better than solo, just from the aspect of like solo you have to take out the man in the pallid mask yourself, you have to deal with the emissary yourself, you have to run around the map yourself, and sometimes it's hard getting past the choke point of like getting from backstage to lobby and back and forth. But in multiplayer, I mean, you can have people spread out in different areas. One person can be handling the emissary while someone else is handling the man. So, yeah, in theory, it should be more manageable. Maybe famous last words.
Well, that's the thing, is I think as long as everyone can position and time, it's going to be fine. But there are lots of very well-designed things to stop us from doing that. I think the biggest of which that we may struggle with will be the goddamn poltergeists.
Yes.
Because, really, at the end of the day, only 2 of our investigators are going to be well set up to deal with them. From the word go.
Yeah.
Like, if we get early poltergeists, like your early bird poltergeists,
yeah,
that's going to be a thing if, Yorick or... Oh, I mean, Safina and Leo, I might take that back. Both Safina and Leo are going to be in pretty good position, too.
Yeah, probably most Safina and Daisy. I wonder if it's going to be worth, like, having a buddy system almost.
That's probably where we're going to end up.
Yorick and Leo can need to be accompanied, at least close by a poltergeist hunter, a ghostbuster, if you will. I think that's kind of one approach, because... Yeah, I think a lot of it is manageable. Again, knock on wood, except for the poltergeist can be a real killer if it hits the wrong person at the wrong time.
Yeah. And I think one of the main things that we'd need to decide is where we're going to hunt clues really hard first. My instinct is always to go backstage first. But I suppose we could potentially split the party, right? I mean,
we could.
Kind of depends on how those first couple turns go, but I almost always like to clear backstage first.
Yeah, because there's technically not like huge enemies yet, except for the emissary, and even the emissary doesn't get a per health, at least. So I think as long as... Yeah, I'm almost... I don't know if we'll end up doing this, but I almost imagine like pairs, like 2 going this way and 2 going the other way, something like that.
Yeah, so I mean, beyond that, it's all just kind of managing the little things as they come out. I think the only other thing worth mentioning is what different Act 2 we get, because that's not something we can plan for, and I promise you right now, we're getting the fucking ooze.
Yeah.
It's just gonna happen. It happens every time I play Carcosa. I think to myself, oh, I can't possibly get the ooze. Oh, it's the fucking ooze again. I'm not bitter about it, though.
Yeah, I have gotten the fire version a lot, I think. I'm trying to remember what all of them do now. I think the fire's agility test, isn't it?
Yeah, here I'm looking at them right now. The water, I think they're all agility tests. It's just a matter of what they do to you when you fail.
The ooze slows you down, right?
The ooze comes from the location where the man in the pallid mask was. It's a test of 4.
That's rough.
And after you leave, and if you fail, you take a horror and a damage. God, that one's so rough. The fire? No, the water is a test of 2, and that's when you would leave, but you only take 1 damage and you can't move. And then the City of Flame is a test of 3, and if you fail, take a damage once per round. And that's after you enter or end your turn at a location. I had to read the other ones because I don't know what the hell they do.
Yeah, I think part of that is going to be... I think Current Call is really going to be all about the timing of, like... trying to time it so we spend as little time as possible on those stupid elemental effects. So basically we're trying to time it so that we nuke the man, and once we do that, he pops up in the lobby, and we want someone there to just like hit him as soon as he shows up. And we also want everyone else to be in a position that they can get to the lobby quickly when that happens. So I'm imagining like we're going to be probably farming VP a little bit, so which means we're going to be like finding all the VP locations and getting the clues, and then we're going to set up for a moment where we can just kind of time it right. If all goes according to plan.
Right, well.
We'll see.
The best laid plans of mice and men, afghanagly. So we'll see where we go with it.
I'll say as someone who's playing as Safina, I'm particularly looking out for any effects that deal damage, because she's very susceptible to getting knocked out by damage, so...
Are you running Trenchcoat?
I'm not planning on it, but I also haven't built my level 0 deck yet, so I'm not sure.
What do you use for health help in Safina?
She doesn't have a ton, actually, and it wasn't a ton of problems solo. I ran her through Carcosa, and that was actually my most successful solo run, surprisingly, and I didn't run a ton of soaks. Just because there's not a ton of damage in Carcosa, actually, as long as you can manage enemies. But there are certain points, like with those elemental effects in Current Call and a stupid treachery in Dim Carcosa, which we'll talk about, that can deal a bunch of damage. Yeah.
You'll talk about it. I have a different nemesis from Dim Carcosa.
Sure. We all have our nemesis from there.
Okay, so then moving into the Last King. I will not make the mistake of upgrading my guiding stones moving into the Last King. Although, in 4-player, there might be more of an argument for it, because more of the VIPs are going to pop, and there'll actually be some clues on locations, I assume, but we'll see. Either way, Higher Ed's like my first buy for this deck because of all of the parlaying that needs to be done.
Yeah, I think because it's...
Fine clothes. Fine clothes. Fine clothes.
Yeah, as fine clothes as you can find. I think because that scenario is not as traditional, like just gather clues, it's just all the parlay tests, that I think skill boosters for everyone is kind of the order of the day. Well, I don't know about everyone, but at least for the 2 best skill boosters, like I'll probably take Streetwise first to bump up my intellect test for Last King, because there's not a lot of need for, like, say, a lockpicks or something like that.
Exactly, yeah. And I'll tell you something. I will also say that we must all prioritize our level 2 wards, because Last King is a thin little encounter deck, and it has 3 copies of Ancient Evils in it. And that's a goddamn thing. Yeah,
we're going to have to keep our eye out to ward Ancient Evils at bad times, like if it hits right. When it would advance and pull out and transform one of the VIPs, because it'll always be the VIP you're currently trying to parlay with 9 times out of 10. And also, the encounter deck has Corrosion in it, which is just an ugly card. So, I don't know, are you imagining we're warding Corrosion, or are we just kind of playing around it and making sure we have enough stuff out there to discard to it?
I kind of feel like there are people who we are going to be okay letting a Corrosion land, and then there are, then there's Leo who are probably going to want to protect from it.
Yeah, for sure.
Because, I mean, as Daisy, if I'm not upgrading my stones, I'm really not going to have a whole lot in my hands. I might have a Chthonian stone at level 0, which, fine. That'll work. But if Leo upgrades into a big weapon, that's going to be a thing. So yeah, I definitely think that's something we have to watch for, our Corrosions, but I think there's going to be more times where we're okay letting it land than in 2-player or any other times that I've run through this campaign.
I think especially in this scenario, I think Corrosion is worse when it pops up in later in the campaign. But I think, like, Safina as well, by this point, she's probably not going to have a ton of, like, items, because I just won't have that much XP yet. Well, depending on how Curtain Call goes, but it's just, it just won't be as painful as it would be for Leo.
So, I'm trying to think, there was one more thing I was going to mention. So prioritizing the VIPs, do you have in mind whether or not the bonuses that you get from certain VIPs are better and or more useful to our run than others?
I personally don't.
I'm a big fan of sorry, I asked the question because I wanted to answer.
Sure. That's fair.
That was my move. And Scott says we have a VIP list, so maybe he's already thought of this.
Yes.
But let me just get this one out at least. So I think Constance is a priority, because that extra horror soak in Unspeakable Oath is very useful, I have found. Oh, Casey's confirming that we definitely have one already. Can one of you link it, please?
I have it here.
Oh, thank you, Ian. Yeah. What have we decided is our priorities?
So the order priority is number 1, Jordan, who provides the extra resources in Phantom. Constance is number 2, which you just mentioned.
Yeah, okay.
I think I'd personally put Constance as number 1, probably, just because Unspeakable Oath is squeaky bum time. But I could see either one of those. Sebastian, number 3, is Easy Clues to start with for Echoes of the Past. Number 4 is Haruko, who gives you a free location in the Paladin Mask, a free location reveal, which, And then last one, 5, Ashley, is 1 horror removed in Black Star's Rise.
and then Scott's goal written here: someone please resign. Anyone, don't let Agenda 2 advance. So it's just sound advice.
I'm actually not, like, I like this list. I like the idea of making a list because I didn't even think about it at first, but I'm not too married to it just because I think Last King is a lot of, like, well, who are you close to and who can your investigator realistically parlay right now? You know?
Right, because especially because there's the couple of them that you have to hit, like, you have to clear a bar before you can even do anything.
Yeah, like a 10
and Jordan,
a 10 resource or whatever, like, so the poor investigators are not going to go do anything with him even if he's number 1 on the list.
Jordan, I do think his bonus is good, but honestly he is the VIP that I score the least because it is just such a deliberate effort to get up to 10 resources to go deal with him. So we'll see.
Yeah, he only talks to people with money. He'd make a good congressman. Yeah, so like the one that's willpower are probably the ones I'm going to be going to, although I should have streetwise. So yeah, I think it's just playing it by ear, kind of.
And there's also the consideration, and it's one of the cool things about this scenario, is that if a certain... I'm trying to think... Who's lower willpower? If Yorick wants to go parlay someone, though he's probably the one who's going to be doing the least parlaying, if they're sitting on that location that makes you test willpower or drop a clue, like that's going to be a thing. So yeah, I do agree that having a priority list is really cool, but we are not going to stick to it. Like we're not going to hinder the campaign to make sure we hit it in that order.
Yeah, it'll be more. It's just more of a tiebreaker.
Guidelines.
Yeah, if we have to choose between two, then that'll come into play, I think.
All right. So. Then beyond that, I really don't think there's a whole lot to talk about with The Last King. We're gonna burn the house down.
Yes, we mentioned that.
That's just a thing that's happening.
Yep. We have our fire ready already.
We brought Lita with us.
We're the
from last year's Iron Man core set.
We'll just play Firestarter by Prodigy on the loudspeakers.
Okay, so then moving to Echoes of the Past. This one, I feel like there aren't as many branching paths. Would you agree? Like, as far as strategy goes?
No, it's pretty much just want to get to the end, get to the hidden library. It's, I mentioned before, it's just a game of whack-a-mole, pretty much. This and Unspeakable Oath are one of the two scenarios from Carcosa I've actually played 4-player. And it's trickier than solo, just because more enemies are popping out, and all the Doom stuff is really popping off. So you just need to be on point of like running around and killing cultists as soon as they show up. So there's not a ton like choices to make. It's just managing the enemies pretty much.
The choice, I think, the one tactical choice that I find myself constantly making when I run through this one is, do we clear the hidden library of clues and then also try to kill the transformed Oath Speaker for max XP gain?
Yeah.
And normally my answer to said question is yes. However, in 4-player, that guy is 20 health.
Yeah.
And he either has to ready or take a doom. So we'd have to go at him real hard, real fast for that to be viable. So
yeah, I'm not super like psyched about trying it unless we're in like a good position and we're just like all kitted out and we're not close to advancing, and then I think like we're in a position to kill him before he puts too much doom, then I could see it. But I'm not currently, at least me personally, I'm not currently planning on going for that like hard.
And that's where I'm at. I'm kind of taking the assumption that these scenarios in 4-player are going to be way more chaotic and unpredictable than anything I've played before, because I've only played most of these scenarios 4-player like 0.75 times if you average it out over the campaign. So
yeah, I think we'll be okay for Echoes. I'm not super worried because it's basically a lot of smaller enemies. It's more like a crowd control type thing. So if I'm not running Storm of Spirits yet, I'm definitely going to adaptable in Storm of Spirits for this scenario because it can just kill like 3 or 4 enemies at once, because they also tend to bunch up at one location in this scenario. So like a big bomb like that, or Dynamite Blast, because the stupid Seeker of Carcosa is 3 health with Aloof, which is super annoying. So yeah, Dynamite Blast is good for that.
Yeah, so ultimately probably going to be a extra credit goal, but not something we need to hold ourselves to.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a story choice to make in Unspeakable Oath, or is it really just which resolution you get to?
For
or not Unspeakable Oath.
For Echoes.
Echoes.
It's just whether you take the Onyx clasp or not. So if you take it as the conviction route, and if you leave it as the doubt route, and then it also affects what tablets you get for Unspeakable Oath.
Yep, so our current goal is, and thank you, Scott, for reminding me of all these things we've already decided. Our current goal is to hit Resolution 2. And that ultimately means, sorry, I'm pulling up the thingies here.
So that is where we're not taking the clasp.
Yes, it's just a silly trinket.
Yeah, so that is because we're actually going conviction route overall, but you can still get a little bit of doubt in. So I think the thinking is there to. I think specifically that choice was made. Scott can correct me to affect what. God, I can't talk right now. What tokens we're getting? What tokens are in for the next scenario?
Yep. Yeah. Okay. Yep. God. See. I need to start taking notes for this because I now like every time this is coming up, I'm remembering the exact conversations we had. Yeah, so we're tactically taking a doubt in our otherwise conviction campaign because it's going to be a way better result for our bag for the knockout punch coming in.
Yeah.
Unspeakable Oath.
So the difference is the conviction route, you get 2 cultist tokens, which is minus X for Unspeakable Oath, where X is the horror. And the doubt route is 2 tablets, which is minus X, which is X is the base shroud.
Yes. Ugh.
And I think there's...
Oh, God, I'm so scared of Oath. I'm so scared of Oath this year.
It's also a difference of... So if you don't take the clasp, then you have to fight Daniel, right? Because it's not... You're not getting friendly, cuddly... Daniel, you only get that if you have the clasp, I believe.
Yes.
The clasp lets you not have to fight him. You just
correct
parlay.
Yeah, because the parlay on the enemy side is just a taunt. It's like, hey, you could have had the clasp.
Yeah. So we're basically going to be fighting Daniel, which is fine.
Which I never really thought about, but that's like Matt's way of getting someone to replay it expecting one thing, and then they're like, what? He's not an enemy now? What the hell?
Yeah, that was definitely a head fake that never turned out to be anything.
Okay, so then moving to Le Unspeakable Oath.
Yeah, this is the big one.
Oh man, I'm
I'm gonna have nightmares about this one before we get to Iron Man.
So I feel like having all of the possible cancels in place is important.
Yes.
Because I think for any of our decks, Straight Jacket at the wrong time is just gonna be a bad time.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Straight Jacket is bad. This one has corrosion, and it probably hurts more at this point, because it works in conjunction with Straight Jacket to just tax you. So definitely the wards.
Yeah.
This is one where the movement
this one also has Ancient Evils, right?
I don't think so, because I didn't put it on my list.
Okay.
I think
that would have made the list, so I'll trust that.
Yeah, unless I just blanked on it, which is entirely possible. Yeah, this is one where movement is super, super key, because the map is so huge, and you basically have to get to one end of it and then back to the beginning to resign. And I think the way you lose Unspeakable Oath is not being able to get back fast enough.
Mm-hmm. So I think one of the biggest things we're going to have to worry about is really keeping our path clear. And I think it might require a little bit more splitting up than we're all comfortable doing. But I don't know. I feel like if we all have enough tricks to protect me and also keep the path clear, we can make it out of this one.
Yeah, I think... Yeah, this is one
this is one where I'm really planning on having my level 2 shortcuts, like, because you drop these in those halls, like, they will get used.
Just fair warning, this is a scenario where I'm planning to adaptable in. I'm out of here. In addition to elusive. So I do plan to get out alive. I'm not sure about the rest of you, but
God, maybe I should tech in like a single astral travel. It'd probably be worth it.
yeah, I think it could be worth it for sure.
Correction, it would definitely be worth it. See, and the whole reason that I'm doing this test and we're doing this discussion is I'm still making edits to this deck I've been planning for 6 months.
Yep, it's a thing. This is one where I'm gonna build. I have my Dim Carcosa build. I'm gonna build level 0, and I'm actually gonna build Unspeakable Oath deck because I want to know exactly what the deck's gonna look like going into. I'm gonna have to estimate the amount of VP we'll have by then, but.
Right.
One card that was useful I mentioned earlier was Time Warp. Now that was solo, but I still think that card can be useful in these kind of scenarios. The way I used it in solo that actually saved me was I was running out of time and I needed to pick which what are the cells called? I can't remember offhand, but basically when you're trying to pick between the different cells and find Daniel, and I needed to pick the right one. I picked wrong, so I time warped it and went to the other location and found Daniel. So, just stuff like that saves you time because you're able to kind of take it back, and patient confinement network is mentioning. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and beyond that, we won't have to worry about constants. Mm-hmm. Hopefully we'll have a couple of extra horror to soak. The lunatics are going to deal some horror. So I feel like if anyone can tech in a little bit of horror heal, we should.
Mm-hmm.
I'll probably have 1 or 2 copies of Logical Reasoning at that point, should we need it. But
yeah,
I don't know. I think, honestly, and I'm back and forth on this, but right now where I'm sitting is you play this kind of offensively.
Mm-hmm.
Intelligently, but offensively. And if you don't make it out, you just have an alternate. Speaking of which, who are you bringing if Safina manages not to find her I'm out of here at the right time?
Yeah, this is a good time to talk about the alternates. I haven't 100% settled. My current plan is to run Jenny as the alternate. With the reasoning there that, I know her really well as an investigator. So my thinking is ideally, because you won't have as much time to set up your understudy, that you want it to be someone you know really well, so you're not learning on the fly. And also she can... It's not a perfect swap for Safina, because Safina is so unique, but Jenny can still take a lot of the rogue cards that I was planning on taking, and she can also still take on the kind of evade lockdown role that in Dim Carcosa against Hastor. What about you?
Well, I really wanted to switch from Daisy to Norman, because I think that with a decent amount of XP, Norman can really pull some weight in Cloovering.
Mm-hmm.
However, it's probably going to depend on how angry I am in the moment.
Yeah.
And knowing me, it's probably just going to be a Rage Rex swap. So that's fair. That's kind of what we're planning for.
I think the other thing with the understudies is that they have to be... Because you're losing out on all the XP that you had leading up to that point. They have to be investigators that can ramp up quickly, like Rex, for example. Or
who just work at level 0.
Yep. Or Jenny, she doesn't need a ton. Just give her money cards and boosters and you're fine. So just ones that are fairly easy to build up quickly.
And then Nick, I don't know if he's committed to one. I know he was looking at Mark if his Leo doesn't make it out.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's still going to stick to kind of pure killer specialty. And then Scott is going Roland, I believe, to kind of keep that well-rounded feel.
Mm-hmm. Hitting the flex spot. Yep. Yeah, Unspeakable Oath is going to be a thing. I think what I've learned in the strategy, too, is you just, reveal the garden and those top 2 locations so that everyone has a place to teleport to, because usually it has to be a revealed location. So reveal the exit early so that people can pop to it at the end.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, assuming we make it out of the Unspeakable
and
we'll make it to Phantom. So now you're going to have to remind me. Phantom Conviction we are being chased.
Yep.
No, we are chasing.
No, we're getting chased because we believe in the thing, so it's chasing us.
I'm really bad at this.
This is the scenario I'm dreading in Iron Man for an entirely different reason.
Go on.
This is not because of the difficulty. This is because Phantom of Truth Conviction can go very long in solo. So I have no idea how long it's going to take in 4-player is kind of my worry with this one.
Yeah, and this one, so let's see. If you have more conviction than doubt, Doom on other cards in this agenda, subtract from. I don't think anyone in our group is going to be running cards in their deck that accumulate Doom, aside from, you've got Renfield, right?
Yeah, currently I'm still kind of mulling that ally choice, but yeah, this is...
You can adaptable him out for one scenario. You'll be fine.
Yeah, exactly. I have adaptable, so I have some options.
Throw in some Dario. Like, he's not nearly as good, but he'll do the job.
Sure. Yeah, there's some options.
Not a Dario fan?
I think he's fine. I think in multiplayer, it's not that I'm not a Dario fan, I just don't play multiplayer enough, and I think that's Dario's sweet spot. So yeah, actually it's not a bad suggestion for 4-player. Just in solo, it's a little dicier, I think.
So I'm trying to think of what specific choices or strategies we might employ here, but this one's, I don't want to call it straightforward because there's definitely things to do, but do you think we're going to focus on killing the Byakis more than evading them? I feel like that's going to be the case. Byaki? Byaki?
Yeah, I imagine more than...
Byaki.
Because they're not super, like, health. That with the investigators we have, I think we'll probably just be killing them. I'm thinking of including maybe adaptabling in a couple of, like, anti-hunter tech, but I don't know how necessary it will be.
Okay.
Like, there's, like, Slip Away, which locks down one for, they don't ready at upkeep. Something like that, but I'm not super married to that. I think I'm going to have to decide on the spot based on how the campaign's
I think 3 out of our 4 investigators are going to have some option to deal with fighting, so... I'm not ultimately... Yeah, I think I'm in the same boat where I'm not ultimately worried about really kind of locking down the strategy on Phantom. It's going to be more managing the time of it and trying to be efficient.
Yeah, it's not even going to be so much... Yeah, it's just going to be about, like, is there any way we can accelerate and get through the scenario faster? Which there's not really a way to do other than being efficient about gathering clues so that you can spend clues to put Doom on the agenda, which is one of the effects. And then also countering cards like Spires of Carcosa, which is basically like 2 Doom subtracting when it pops out, which... Spires of Carcosa can make it really drag. So
okay. I forgot that one was in there.
That might be one I ward. Because there's not a ton that's super bad. And then there's also the Twin Suns that removes Doom. Or you can take Thor, which a lot of us are actually well placed. Well, I guess 2 of us are well placed to take Horror, me and you. But yeah.
Yeah, we'll see how we're looking at this point. But yeah, I think ideally... Okay, so moving on from there, then we have Le Pallid Mask.
Yes.
Which, this is one I've only played in 3-player, and it was interesting, because our Kluver got stuck alone in the, hang on, Dark Shaft? Narrow Shaft. And died.
Not
and
where
we
you
couldn't get enough clues
stuck.
quickly enough. Yeah. So that's going to be the thing. Is I feel like our we just have to make sure that the Pathfinders are being the Pathfinders, and by Pathfinders I mean not the Seeker.
Yeah, right. And clearing the way so that like Daisy doesn't have to be messing around with any of that crap, but can just go and dodge in, and get the clues instead of taking on the face whatever those location effects are.
I know we talked about it when we kind of talked about the scenario in general. Do you have a specific approach, direction that you favor that sort of thing when you're exploring the catacombs?
I think at first I just always tend to go like to the right and down. And I think the scenario kind of leads you that way too. But one of the things I learned over time is it's useful sometimes to create little loops around the way. So investigate it so that there's like a square of 4 locations like in the middle and another one here. And basically what that lets you do is do like a little like comedy routine of running around while the enemy chases you around the locations. Because if you just have a straight line, then it puts you in some bad situations where all the hunters are just going in a straight line towards you.
Yeah, and yeah, I agree with that. Creating loops, and BD Flory mentions in the chat here that if you try to, when you can, go up and to the right, that the way the locations play out is they're going to loop back around and reconnect more readily. So I feel like that's going to be our main kind of strategy as far as, at least to the extent that we can employ it.
Yeah, which is what you want, because I've gotten in the situation a couple times using my other strategy of going like down to the right, where you get stuck at the end and you have to go back like halfway to find the locations that you haven't explored yet, and it's just a time waster. So
yeah.
And one of the big...
Are we... No, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. Because I think...
Are we going to ice the Spectre of Death? Is that
okay?
Is that a thing we're going to try to do?
That is what I was going to mention. I don't know if it's so much that we're going to try to, if we're going to need to, if it's like in our way too much. So it has 20 health at 4-player. That it's definitely doable with the people we have. Like I imagine Nick will have his big guns by then, and maybe we double or nothing it. I think that's another play it by ear. I feel better about going after the Spectre of Death than the Possessed Oath Speaker, I'll say that much.
Interesting. I would have said the other way around. Is there any specific reason?
Just because the Oath Speaker, I think, puts you on more of a timer because it's racking up Doom, whereas the Spectre of Death, I mean, it's just there. And it's definitely rough, though, because I believe this is the one that when it's evaded, you do 1 fewer damage. I think that's the case.
Yeah, that's correct.
So that sucks in multiplayer because you can't do the typical, like, oh, I'll evade him, and it just makes it harder. So I don't know. Depends on if Nick has his big gun kit out, I think. We're feeling lucky.
Yeah, I feel like that's another one that's kind of an optional goal. It's not something that we're going to hold ourselves to, but if we're in a good position to do it, we'll go there.
This is another scenario that has the poltergeist, so kind of same considerations, I think.
The buddy system.
The buddy system, yep. The buddy system, spells, that kind of thing. And
I was looking at the other encounter sets too.
And this one has Crypt Chill too, so it's one worth like throwing out that like garbage asset or whatever that you can discard for that.
All right. So God, I don't think there's no other like story decision to make. It's just a matter of whether you. I mean, because we're going conviction, and when you go conviction, you fight the man in the pallid mask, right?
Yeah, well, there is... I mean, the choice is, is just whether you fight the man in the mask or spend the clues. So that matters for doubt and conviction. But it also matters, again, this is another case where the tablets matter. So if you defeat the man in the mask, you get 2 cultists for Black Star's Rise, which is another fail point of the whole campaign, so it's important. So the cultist token for Black Star's Rise is an auto fail against an enemy with Doom, which is not great. But
during an attack or evasion, yes.
Yeah, but the R2, if you spend clues, you get 2 tablets next scenario. And what that does is you reveal another token, and if you fail, you put 1 Doom on each agenda. That is a bad token. That is the token that caused me to fail my first run of Black Star's Rise. Now, I'm not sure if it's worse or better in multiplayer, but it's basically lowering the timer on Black Star's Rise, which we're about to get there in a second, but I feel like that's the main way we'll lose, is just losing out on time. The rest can be managed. So I think just going our regular route of defeating the Man in the Mask, that gets us conviction anyway, and that avoids the tablet token.
Sounds solid. Okay, so speaking of Black Stars Arise, our second potential knockout punch.
Yep.
So this one, I mean, you just go hard on one agenda first, right? To pop it and see where you're at. Like, that's...
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is...
I mean, you do pay for it with the tougher enemies, but I feel like it's still worth it.
Yeah, because if you do both, the agenda 2s on both give you some bad stuff. I think one is H of Evil's Surge, and the other one is, like, Stronger Enemies, if I'm remembering correctly. So if you are kind of trying to hedge your bets, then you're going to have both of those out at once. Whereas if you pursue one hard, then you're just having to deal with one.
Which are we going to pursue? Would we prefer Stronger Enemies or Surge on Ancient Evils?
I think the way... in sorry if I give credit to the wrong person, but I think it was Scott who just suggested hitting the left side hard. The reason why is because, again, this is another tablet consideration.
So that's the one that gives Ancient Evil Surge?
I believe so, yes. Yeah.
Yes.
So the difference of this one is if you go left side, you get 2 tablets for Dim Carcosa, which is a -3, and if you fail, you place a clue on a location. If you get the right side, then it's 2 Elder Things, which -3, and then you lose an action when you're fighting and evading a monster Ancient One. Which, spoiler alert, that's what we're doing the whole scenario. So we're trying to avoid the Elder Thing. The problem is we have no control over it, so we just go left and hope that's the one.
And you know what? If we're wrong, then we have a path at least. I think what can stop you up, at least the first couple times you play this one, or the first time you play this one, is going like, I don't know which way I should go. Like, even if you make the encounter deck a little bit harder with the enemies or the Surge, at least you know which way you're going.
Mm-hmm. And there's also the thing that you can plow ahead and get inside the building, and then once you see those locations, you can, if you haven't advanced yet, you can quickly see which one is the right agenda. Based on which, there's like 2 final locations, and one of them has victory points, and that's the one that's not the right agenda, and then the other one has some special thing on it, and that tells you what the right agenda is.
Yeah, definitely. I'm looking through these cards again, and quick tangent here. Dear God, the fact that Worlds Merge is not a playmat yet is just an affront to the card game community.
Yeah.
It is such good art.
There's lots of good art in that one. This is I'm not as worried with this one as I am for Unspeakable Oath, but it's still a place we could lose, which would suck. And I think the main way is through Doom. This one has the shitty cultist set in it, which like churns out the Doom. So we're gonna need someone in 4-player especially. Like, that cultist set in 4-player is a bad combination, so we need some...
Especially on this map that's so, like, bifurcated.
Yes.
Where you got the starting area and you've got the ending area. So, I mean, you can mitigate where the cultist goes a little bit, but it still gets trickier, in, especially the Acolytes in multiplayer, because it has to go somewhere empty. And if we're spread out on one end of the map, then that can be real rough.
Yeah, we're definitely going to have to focus on just, like, killing those cultists. It's going to be similar to Echoes of the Past in a way, I think. Cultists.
Okay, so I'm trying to think. Again, no real other choices to be made in that one. It's just a matter of whether we get through it or not.
Yeah, no choices there. It's just win or die.
But then moving into Cosa, Dim Lost Carcosa. At this point, we will have achieved our conviction run through, so Lord of Carcosa will be coming at us. I mean, this is another one that kind of plays like Oath to me a little bit, where I think the buddy system is going to be a thing. Oh yeah, okay, so Scott brings up a good point that we haven't touched on except for at the beginning. this is where the going hard on chasing the stranger is really going to help us out, because the tally marks at this point means if you have 0 to 2 under chasing the stranger, you get 3 doom, 3 to 5, 2 doom, 6 to 8, 1 doom, and 9 plus you don't start with any additional doom, and that's the level we want to be at. That's where we live. And then our goal is ultimately to just cap Hastur, really.
Yeah. It's pretty much just going to be a game of, like, getting set up, but it's a sweet spot with Dim Carcosa. Like, it gives you time to set up, but it's also one that'll let you, like, build your own demise, because if you take too long to set up, you give the encounter deck time to knock you out with these killer cards like Dismal Curse, which you have to test will, and if you fail, you can take 2 damage or 4 freaking damage if you have no horror, no sanity remaining. So this is one this is a scenario because Safina is fragile that I'm thinking of adaptabling in some bodies to soak it up, basically.
Sure. Yeah, my personal nemesis in this one, what I will be saving my awards for, regardless of how much you guys plead and beg, will be Realm of Madness, which is like, it's like corrosion on acid.
Yeah.
And steroids and ecstasy. And it just broke up with its abusive ex-girlfriend, and it's coming to talk. Discard cards from play and or from your hand with a total printed resource cost of at least X, where X is the amount of horror on your investigator. When most of us are going to be starting at 3 or 4 and only going up from there, it's going to be rough.
Yeah, I think this is talking about stuff to tech in. I think this is another place where, like, horror heals could come in. The more you can keep below that, like, max sanity threshold, the better chance we'll have. Especially because the Hastur we have, if you have no sanity remaining, then when you're fighting or evading, I think it's +1s and 0s and Elder Signs are treated as the auto-fail, which makes the bag really unforgiving. So we want to make sure that doesn't happen. So trying to think of what horror heals I might want to bring in, maybe some Liquid Courage, something like that, to try to keep us topped up.
Yeah, Nick was debating playing Carolyn at the early part of the campaign when we were kind of figuring out our investigators, and I feel like this is the one where we're really gonna miss not having her around.
Yeah, big time. Because I think I can run something like Liquid Courage. I think there's a few of us have some options. Like,
yeah, I mean, I could, if we really wanted at that point, I could throw in, a couple XP to, keep logical reasoning in my deck or something like that.
Yeah. Well, there's also, this has Striking Fear in it as well, so maybe logical reasoning isn't the worst call there.
Ugh. Okay, so, again, Cap Hastur, get out. And hopefully our like goal of goals is to get out without anyone having a possession in their hand. Mm-hmm. But that I have yet to do. If we do it, this will be like my biggest W I've put up.
All 4 of us.
So we'll see if we get there. Yeah,
it'll be a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is. I'm so curious to see how this scenario plays 4-player.
Oh, I'm so excited. Especially having this conversation now and kind of talking through it. I'm like, oh, man. And I have the Con of the Rings, which is the Lord of the Rings fan con the weekend before. So I've got like something to plan for before it, but I'm still like, everything now is just an obstacle between me and Arkham Nights.
Yeah, just imagine we're going to be 2 that we're going to be setting up and like getting to grips with Dim Carcosa at like 9 something maybe at night. And
yeah, that seems about accurate.
It is going to be so crazy because we're going to be like half tired and out of it, but we're taking on like one of the most tense scenarios in the game in my book.
Well, and I feel like that's one of the biggest reasons that we have these conversations so in depth beforehand, is because by the time you hit your 7th scenario straight in a day, when all you've done is taken bathroom and food breaks, like, you're making play mistakes.
Yeah.
That's just gonna happen. So at least having these thoughts in your head will hopefully guide us in a vaguely correct direction.
I just need like someone in my corner, like a boxing match, like cut me, wiping my brow. It's gonna be a thing, but yeah, I think it's really Dim Carcosa and Unspeakable Oath that it's gonna come down to.
I'm excited. I'm excited. So, okay, so wrapping this discussion in general up, so what do you think, having gone through this process now, not entirely, of course, we haven't played it yet, but just kind of talking through this, what do you think that listeners can glean from this, or lessons that we learn from this, just from doing it, that don't necessarily pertain to Iron Man?
I think the main thing that I would take away is I tend not to be like as intentional as I can be with my upgrades when I'm just playing a regular campaign. And so I think one thing that can be taken away is, like, even if you're not playing Iron Man, you can go through a process of like planning out your upgrades more methodically, depending on what campaign you're playing, and being more thoughtful about, like, you don't necessarily need to have a detailed plan, depending on, although you can if you're like a Scot, but you can at least make like some kind of scenario by scenario list of upgrades you think you might be aiming for.
Yeah, so if you're planning out a non-Iron Man campaign, like, what do you think of the things we talked about? Like, if you had to name 3 of the considerations we've listed throughout this discussion, what do you think are the top 3 things someone should think about if they're taking this seriously and planning it out, but not taking it to this level of Iron Man?
In general, or for upgrades?
Yes. if you would include carefully plotting out your upgrades as one of those 3,
Yes.
then yes.
Yes, I would.
Scott says don't play skids. Pro tip.
I was so tempted to play skids through Carcosa, but ultimately my desire for a toolbox of Fito went out.
Yeah, you don't hate yourself that much. I understand.
Well, if I was playing skids, it would be more about you guys hating me when I just constantly resign from scenarios.
Ooh, yes, Josh in the chat asks a question that I meant to bring up at this point. And it's actually a very important question to any campaign you play out in any context, Iron Man or no. And that is, how exactly is your group going to be approaching Delve Too Deep?
I think the way we're approaching it is that 2 of us are taking it.
We run it.
Yeah. Like at least 2 people.
I currently only have 1 copy in my deck because I feel like as much as I churn out, I'm going to see it almost every scenario.
Mm-hmm.
But it might not take much for me to like swap out that guidance for a second delve. Oh yeah, one of the reasons. Yeah, so we've got, you're running 2 delve, I'm running 1 delve. Nick won't be able to run it, but then Yorick has Barium Deep, so that's kind of like a decent stand-in, I would say.
Yeah, I'm planning on running 2, but again, I have adaptables, so like, if I get to Unspeakable Oath and I'm nervous, I might adaptable them out and put something else in, and then put them.
No one could blame
them back in again for the next scenario, something like that. And then obviously, as I get towards the later, like tougher stuff, then I might take them out permanently.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
so in general, about at what point are you, just in general, when you're playing a campaign in Arkham Horror, the card game, when are you taking delves out? Scenario like the 2nd, 3rd to last?
Yeah, like around pack 3 of the cycle, around there, somewhere around there.
Pack 3 of the cycle?
Not of the actual packs. So that would be scenario 5.
Somewhere between 2/3 and 3/4 of the way through.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that seems about right. I think yeah, like 2nd or 3rd to last. I think it depends on your deck. If you are running a really hungry XP deck, or you're playing Agnes and taking advantage of exile cards or something like that, then there's an argument. But at a certain point, you got to start taking them out. Even even though I understand how much we all love them.
And also scenario dependent too, so if I take them out for Unspeakable, then maybe I'll leave them in for an extra scenario or something. Have to see.
Yeah, and I think they're definitely more attractive with the scenarios that have a distinct resign location, right? Because you can do the resign and or delve and resign trick, which I'm still afraid Matt's gonna errata at some point. Like, each player draws an encounter card. Add delve too deep to the victory display. No player may resign this turn.
Yeah. I'm trying. Are there a ton of resigns in Carcosa? There's Last King, Unspeakable Oath. Oh boy, Curtain Call, of course. There's a lot of scenarios that it's like get to this last location, like Pallid Mask.
It's Curtain Call, Last King. I mean, technically it's not a resign, but you can kind of treat it that way if we're going out via the hidden library in Echoes.
Yeah, those last location
Oath.
types. Oath has a resign, yeah.
Pallid Mask does not. That's a run out the clock kind of situation. Yeah, I feel like there's a fair few in this campaign. Yeah. So.
Going back to the question of what other takeaways you can apply to other campaigns. So there's the delve strategy. There's like planning out your upgrades. I think one thing I didn't think about too much until I looked at the little strategy document, the path that Scott posted was, and that I kind of incorporated into my strategy thing, was about thinking about tokens. That's something I don't think about a lot. I just kind of, because I tend to more roleplay my campaigns, like what would this person do, and then the tokens are just a byproduct. But I guess if you're aiming to have better results, then you might want to look ahead and say which token is worse for the next scenario. That's something I never do, but it's something I might pay attention to more now.
And honestly, I think it's one of the things we probably missed adding to that list at the top of things that are specific considerations for Carcosa, because Dunwich didn't really do much with it outside of just punishing you for failing certain things with tablets. Forgotten Age, you do make a few story choices, but you're still adding tokens to the bag. So, I mean, you have some agency there, but this sort of like binary, okay, we decide this or this, and that results in us getting X or Y token. Like, that's very Carcosa.
Yeah, you can have a lot more control over the bag than you can in any of the other cycles so far. And it's something, it's a part of the game that maybe doesn't get enough attention, I would say. It's something I'm at least am noticing more and more, is how much those tokens affect my game, particularly the very bad ones. Like, there's some tokens, man, in scenarios that will just ruin your day, and if you didn't have those tokens and had a different token, you probably would win. So to my mind, those are kind of...
I'm looking at you, Last King.
Those are big impact tokens that, like, even if you're not playing Iron Man, just playing at home, that you can keep an eye out for.
So I think... Yeah, and I think that's ultimately what I would say, kind of answering my original question, what lessons could be learned from this kind of process, is look at what decision points the campaign gives you and really look at what's worth, going after putting resources into fixing a certain result, and what's kind of not. What's worth just kind of letting the game do what the game's going to do. And, whatever shape that takes for each campaign, we will see. But for Carcosa, that's what we've lined up.
Yeah, and just like picking out those key, like, you can't tech for an entire encounter deck, right? So you just kind of have to pick out like 2 or 3 encounter cards that are the worst or particularly bad for your investigator, and just figure out in advance how you're going to deal with them. Like, an example of that is Hunting Shadow, which is in Carcosa, and it's from the core set, which spend 1 clue or take 2 damage. I'm running Investigator Safina, who's very thin on the health margin. So that's something that makes me stop and think maybe I should hold on to a clue, and not just spend all my clues as soon as I can on any given scenario. Stuff like that.
Yep, I agree. Any final thoughts on Iron Man prep? as just kind of a general topic. I have one last thing to toss in here, kind of on a more meta level.
No, I think it's the type of thing that's not for everyone who plays this game, but personally I really enjoy, like, because I feel like I'm in the game for lots of very different reasons. I love the role play, kind of play a story aspect, but there's part of me that's still a card gamer and likes, like, metagaming a campaign within an inch of its life.
Yeah, and here's the thing: is like at most days, I'm like pure ritualist. I just want to play around and tinker around with card interactions and have my fun little decks and still enjoy the campaigns as they are. Once a year, I really love digging in and being like, all right, where is this campaign's weak points and how far in can we get the knife before it can do anything about it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of our equivalent of a tournament, right? Where you
exactly
plan out, like, what is this, the encounter decks, the scenarios are our metagame, and we plan how to, like, handle everything, basically.
Although, you know, for being fair, if we're really making this an analog to, like, a true competitive tournament scene, we should probably crank it up to hard. But that's not what we're trying to do. We play on standard because I wouldn't play if we played on hard, probably. But
we don't want the insanity to be real, Sean. So that's why we're playing on standard.
Well, there's that. Our slogan for Iron Man is that finishing is winning. Yes. It's not about what difficulty you play on. Any of the groups that are playing Iron Man at Arkham Nights this year can choose to play on easy, and no one will say anything about it. So, the one thing I will say is that this year I plan to be really diligent about chronicling our Iron Man campaign as we go through. So on the Saturday of Arkham Nights, hopefully anyone who's interested can kind of pay attention to our social media. I'll have this out on at least Instagram and Facebook, and I'm fairly certain we can wrap in some kind of Twitter synchronization there too.
Yeah, it'd be funny to have, like, I am a nerd who watches sports, and a lot of, like, sports, they'll have kind of the live blogging of, like, at this time, you know, so-and-so scored a touchdown or whatever. So I could see doing that on Twitter, where it's like, at this time, you know, Nick blasts Scott with a shotgun in the face, something like that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and that's exactly what I plan to do. When we have moments that are worth mention, I will definitely mention them. And then so here's the other thing. Okay. Pay attention, everyone. I'm using my pay attention voice now.
Waiting for the shoe to drop.
I'm going to we'll post fun pictures and little happenings as they happen, but for each scenario as we go through this campaign, I'm going to post a main kind of, hey, this is our curtain call post. Here's what happened. Other Iron Man groups who are doing this at Arkham Nights can feel free to comment and post their own stories and resolutions in the comments. And this also opens up the window for anyone else who can't make it to Arkham Nights but still wouldn't mind dedicating that Saturday to playing Arkham with a play group or by themselves. If you want to play Arkham Knott's Iron Man 2018, feel free to follow along, post your results and strategies and fun moments on those posts, and hopefully we can make a kind of a fun day of it, regardless of whether you can be at Arkham Nights with us or not.
Yeah, I like that idea a lot.
So if you haven't done so already, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Instagram, it's barely an account at this point, but you can get ahead of it. It's the Mythos Busters.
It shall be one. That is true.
Okay, let's wrap it up here then with a little bit of tentacle time. Ian, what's been grabbing thee of late?
Well, there's one big thing that's been grabbing me. People who have been listening for a long time know that I rarely play video games these days, unless they're like mobile games on my phone. Usually I'm just tabletop all the way. But I have gotten wrapped up in Shadow of the Tomb Raider these past couple weeks, which is the newest Tomb Raider game in the kind of reboot trilogy.
Okay, so it's the third one I was just going to ask.
Yes,
okay.
Yeah. So I played the first one. I did not play the second one. I missed that one. That was probably in like the middle of like having a kid, having a baby. I think that's how the timing works out. But so I'm kind of in the mode now where I try not to get wrapped. I used to be like completionist, like I can't play the third one if I haven't played the second one, and I'm like, screw that. Who knows when I'll play the second one? I want to play the new hotness. So I jumped.
No, you're a better man than me.
Yes, so I jumped straight into Shadow, which is the third one. I loved the first one, so I knew I was probably going to love this one. And so I've jumped into it, and it's so good. I love that it's a perfect accompaniment to being in the Forgotten Age campaign right now. Is
it in Mesoamerica?
Yeah, so the setting for this one is you start off in Mexico, raiding a tomb, as you do.
As you do.
And then some bad stuff happens, which I won't spoil, but the opening levels are awesome, because it's escaping from some craziness. And then you go off down to Peru to basically find a hidden city that has been lost to records. That sounds very familiar to Forgotten Age. So I was getting my good Forgotten Age vibes going on that. And it's just a very cool game. You know, it's the classics. I really like the reboot series, how they change things up, making things more quote-unquote realistic.
Hey, so you remember, and you're an Xbox guy, so
Yes.
you may not have had the same experience. But I played Tomb Raider from Tomb Raider 1 on the PC fairly faithfully up through then when they did the Legends and Underworld reboot. I remember there was a point where Uncharted, the first one, came out, and I'm like, God damn it, they just out Tomb Raidered Tomb Raider.
Right. Yeah.
And it sat that way for a couple years, and then they rebooted Tomb Raider. I'm like, damn it. Now, Tomb Raider has out Uncharted, which has out Tomb Raider. I mean, Uncharted I still prefer, but
it's very much...
It's cool that
yeah,
that they learn from each other.
It's very much a response to Uncharted. I played those original Tomb Raider games, which were fun at the time, of course, but this is just a whole nother world of, like, storytelling and exploring and all that. And, what was I gonna...
And odd angles in the pool with Laura's butt. I was a really creepy little 12-year-old. So I'll just admit that right now. I spent a lot of time in the training pool.
I don't think you were alone in that, Sean. So, but one thing I like about this installment is, one, they kind of added some RPG, maybe not RPG elements, but the fact that you're actually like going to these towns and interacting with people, which hasn't been the case in past Tomb Raiders. So like Lara Croft feels more like an actual, I feel like for the first time she feels like an actual character. Like, because before you're just kind of in the wilderness, so she doesn't have a ton of people to interact with. And in this one, you're going into towns and you have like some people on your team, so she actually feels more like a person, I guess. And
sure.
And also, this is like the first game that really like questions the whole Tomb Raider thing, that maybe it's not always like the coolest thing to go into people's areas and just randomly raid their tombs and take their ancient artifacts of their people. Like, this game actually calls that out as part of the story, which I think is cool. So yeah,
because Lara Croft as a character has always kind of oscillated back and forth between being a true fortune hunter and being Indiana Jones, right? Like, depending on what game you're playing, she's at a different spot on that spectrum.
Yes, yeah, agreed. And I think this is like the game that's kind of calling out those two sides and like having her actually go through a journey of like figuring out what the hell she wants to do. Like, what does it mean to actually be a Tomb Raider, I guess. Yeah.
Cool.
Answering some questions.
I played the first one of the reboot and missed the second one.
Yes.
So, and I only missed the second one because they did a ridiculous Xbox exclusive thing for it for like the first 12 months, and then by that point I had forgotten. So we have to run back to that.
Yeah, super. Definitely.
Would you say it's easy to hop in without having missed any important story points? Is it kind of a self-contained situation?
Yeah, I definitely think so. There's a few things going on at the beginning where it's clearly continuing that I'm like, what? But I mean, it's a pretty straightforward story that you're not like feeling lost at all. I don't think so. Like, I'll probably, now that I'm reminded of how much I like Tomb Raider, I'll probably go back and play the second one at some point, which I think takes place in some snow environment, which sounds cool. But
you know what you should do instead? You should buy a PS4 and get Uncharted.
Yeah, that I mean, if I love Tomb Raider so much, I really like this new reboot series. I'm sure I'll probably freaking love Uncharted. I'm pretty sure about that.
It's well, and especially I think you can really get into the series, and Nate Drake has a really cool story in 1 through 4, and 4 really caps it off in just a really satisfying way. But you could play The Lost Legacy without having experienced basically any other of the Uncharted games, and The Lost Legacy was one of my favorites, and that's one that actually takes 2 of the side characters from 2 and 4 and pairs them together to great results. So I know it's probably going to be a while before you get there, but dog ear that one, Uncharted: The Lost Legacy. It's very, very good.
Yeah, it'll probably be held off a little bit because I have a game called Red Dead Redemption 2 coming up, and also
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
And also Call of Cthulhu game coming up in October. So yeah, eventually I'll get to it, maybe.
Yeah. So I'm almost done with Spider-Man. I think percentage-wise, I'm at like 91% of everything unlocked. I'm almost through the story. Still loving it. Act 3 gets it gets different in its tone. I'm not sure I'm straight up ready to say that I don't like Act 3 compared to Acts 1 and 2, but it feels different as a game, and I don't think it's as fun, but still satisfying, if that makes any sense.
Interesting.
So I'm still working my way through that. I'm like on the last leg of finishing Dragon Age Inquisition. I finished the main story, which... Okay, I was going to talk about Solo, but I'm changing my mind. I'm going to talk about Dragon Age for a little bit, because playing through the last fourth of the Inquisition story reminded me exactly how much I love the world they've built for the Dragon Age games.
Oh, I love that world, yeah.
Probably my favorite fantasy world, and I know we've talked
game.
about this. Sorry Middle Earth, sorry Westeros. And I'll say it for Nick. Sorry, Azeroth, even though Azeroth is not that dear to me, even though it does have some really cool backstory.
3 boldness points.
But so, Inquisition I thought was a fantastic game. The world that they have built just has so many cool aspects. You've got the whole mage Templar dynamic, which is basically like mages are it's kind of like X-Men with swords and staves.
Yeah, that's a good comparison, I think.
Where mages are just kind of born, and they're sometimes uncontrollable, and they have a really bad reputation and no one running PR for them, so of course they get regulated and thrown into these kind of containment cells essentially, and of course then they rebel, and it's just a really cool dynamic to explore. So the one that really sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask, so where would you put this one in the ranking of the 3 Dragon Age games?
In a general overall ranking?
Yes.
Top for me.
Ooh, wow.
It edged out Origins because I think the story delivery is just so much more solid.
Sure.
It's not like Mass Effect 2 levels of production value, but it's definitely highest for Dragon Age production values.
Yeah, it's also kind of like Origins still had a... Like, Origins is... Well, I still have to play Inquisition, but I have a hard time imagining anything knocking out Origins for me. But I feel like Origins still has its feet in, like, the old BioWare isometric RPG land. Like, it's kind of straddling the line, whereas Inquisition is more like cannonball into the pool of, like, modern RPGs.
Yeah, but the nice thing is, I don't know if anyone wants to play it this way. I would recommend doing it on console, but you still can play in tactical mode. Like, if you want to throw on Nightmare, and there's a pause button where then you can take control of every member of your team, show them where to run, show them where to direct their attack. Like, you can get there if you want to. But I felt like this one does play really well if you want to handle it more like an action RPG.
Right.
And I know I mentioned it last time I talked about Inquisition, is that kind of one of the design philosophies for the game, is that this is an RPG that can take you 20 hours or 200 hours, depending on how much of it you want to tackle. So I went into this playthrough thinking like, okay, I'm going to be 30 hours. I'm going to get the main missions, and I'm going to get the companion missions out of the way, because one of the best things about a BioWare game is interacting with your companions.
Agreed.
So 80 hours later, I'm capping off the end of it. But the thing is I was even though I had different plans, I was glad to still get into the crafting and like kind of hunt for materials to craft a really good sword, and like you can name it. Like, I named my Inquisitor's sword Judgment, and, like, every time I equip that thing, I'm like...
That's a cool touch of naming the swords.
Yes! So, it's just little things like that game really speaks to me, and you can really... I wish there were more armor models in the game, but with the ones that they have, you can customize and color and, like... modify arms and legs on armor suits, and anyway, it tickles me in a lot of ways that the other ones have not. So I've just a big props. But anyway, back to the story. This one in particular gets really Lovecraftian, like about halfway through the story.
Interesting.
Because there's one of the dynamics of the world that Dragon Age is set in is that basically this is a world where basically all of the gods have abandoned it. So it's not altogether too unlike Middle-earth, because gods in the Dragon Age world are kind of a squishy term. But they end up coming into play, kind of like those things you heard about in Legends, or like if you were diving into codices in the prior games, and you may have caught references to, like they bring those into the foreground for the Inquisition, and it's really cool to see how it plays out. And yes, exactly. And there's a big twist at the end that I was so tickled by it, and I can't share it because it's a huge ass spoiler, but.
Yeah, that
anyway,
reminds me of the old Dragonlance novels where it had like these gods that were not around anymore, but as part of the books they start coming into play. Spoilers for a 40-year-old trilogy.
So anyway, Dragon Age Inquisition. It's a little old at this point, but if you like action RPGs or tactical RPGs, I would definitely give that one a roll, because you can find it cheap.
Yeah, I've had that since it came out, and I've played like the first hour. I need to go back because I'm a huge Dragon Age fanboy. Dragon Age Origins is maybe my favorite fantasy RPG of all time. That's how much I love it.
Ooh. All right.
So I need to give Inquisition a chance again. I think it was because it just changed up the formula that I didn't give it as much of a look. And the time it came out.
And one thing I will say in your defense and in defense of anyone who's quit that game after playing an hour or two, the game does not do a great job of directing you in the early game. It really could have done a better job of explaining its menu, explaining how its objectives work. Like they're little text things, and I think you get like one kind of walkthrough mission, but that's it.
Yeah.
But once you bother to learn how that works, and you see it's actually way more simple than it would seem without direction, very, very good game. Highly recommended.
Cool.
Also, Scott's in it. FYI. I don't know if anyone knows that, but BioWare's in Edmonton, Scott's in Edmonton, and apparently Scott's not a fan of the Dragon Age series, and he knows someone at BioWare, and they wrote him into the game where he's dead. He died. He's part of a fetch mission where it's like, yeah, so he's the corpse that you have to go get one of the items off of. So fun Mythos Busters trivia. Scott's in Dragon Age Inquisition.
That's another reason.
And his wife, yes, and his wife is she's in it as well.
I'm gonna play it just to go Scott hunting.
Now that I'm thinking about it, that's actually a really cool little bit of Mythos Busters trivia. I should have led with that. That probably was the way to go. But yeah,
we should have a Mythos Busters contest where people screenshot finding Scott's body in the game. Oh man. Please send that our way.
I mean, I'm super down with that.
Yeah, we need to come up with a we'll workshop it and get back to you guys, but I can totally see us.
I'm being silent right now because I'm trying to come up with a hashtag and I'm coming up short. So help me, chat. What's a good hashtag for that contest? Corpse Strong? Hashtag Corpse Strong? No? Nothing?
I gotta let that one sit for a bit.
Okay. Hashtag Only good Scott is a dead Scott. Thank you, Scott. Okay. There it is. Hashtag busted.
Nice.
Yep.
Now we need to all weasel our way into video games somehow, so this can become a thing.
That's definitely one of my end goals. Like, I would love to be someone who gets shot with a laser at a Star Wars movie. That would be like, that would be so cool. Life goal for me, really.
If they would ever make some more Mass Effect games, if we could all find our way into that, that would be amazing.
All right, well, we'll wrap it up there. So, as you guys always know, and as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, if you still want to get in on this initial Patreon drive and be entered for a chance at that Arkham Nights pack, in addition to other cool things, please go pledge our Patreon. Pledge to? I'm having a real problem with prepositions today. It's a thing.
Yeah. Pledge to, I think?
Pledge to our Patreon at patreon.com/mythosbusters. As always, you can find us on our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter feeds. If you've got a comment, question, moan, gripe, or bitch, you can find us at the Mythos Busters hotline. That's 203-493-6984 or 203-493-MYTH. I'm sure we have other things. Oh, God! Okay, hang on. Actually, something worth mentioning. The AV Club has seen a resurgence. Scott has really taken the reins and given it a hard ride in the past couple of weeks.
Yeah, that's definitely the way to put it.
So if you're unaware of what the AV Club is, it's a little side project we do where we go out on Twitch and YouTube and we do in-depth card reviews of packs and expansions as they come out. So right now we're working our way through the middle point of Carcosa. We're somewhere in the Mythos packs of
Black
Carcosa.
Stars Rise, I think, is next.
Damn, okay, we're that far. Good man, Scott. Good job. Go you. So anyway, if you want to catch those out on YouTube, that's our YouTube channel at Mythos Busters. You can see us live at Twitch. I would recommend going out there subscribing if you want to get the notification for when we go live. And then last, if neither of those two options work for you, we have a separate RSS where we host these the audio files from those sessions. So go check out the Miskatonic AV Club. And you'll see some new episodes popping up there as well.
Yeah, you should also, this is a good reminder, I totally blanked. You should also subscribe to our Twitch because I'm starting a solo campaign series soon. Capital letters soon. Next week is my current plan, probably around Wednesday-ish, let's call it. But basically, this is going to be me playing solo through a campaign, streaming on Twitch. It'll be available on YouTube as well. I had Twitter vote on The Investigator, and they picked Father Mateo for me. I was having them pick out of the Forgotten Age Gators. And then I had them pick campaign, and what do you know? It's Carcosa. So I'm going to be taking solo Mateo through Carcosa. I'm going to start with a deck building episode first, and then get going with Curtain Call.
And if people want to catch you live, do you kind of have a tentative schedule for when that's going to be?
Tentative? Probably Wednesdays, I think. Probably, yeah. I will, let's say this, I will tweet out and Facebook the information as soon as I have a better idea. So follow Twitter, follow Facebook.
All right. Well, I think that's going to wrap it up for episode 45 of Mythos Busters, guys. I think we will see you. I can't remember if it's going to be before or after Arkham Nights, but either way, we'll see you when we see you. Bye-bye.